something's going on with their link. Is there a new link or a new code number?
No, still the same link. 866-4144-1605.
Hold on one second. Is that the one okay, wait a second. I have that. 866-414-4145. Okay.
Correct.
All right. I'll send it out to them now.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Did the judge make it over?
I'm here. Good afternoon, everybody.
All right. Thank you. All right. We will start with self-introductions. Anybody? Don't be shy.
Colonel David Holmes.
Go ahead, Colonel.
Ladies before John.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Since Mr. Weeks said this is the last week, we can say Happy New Year. Happy New Year if I haven't seen you already. I'm Valerie Wanza, Broward County Public Schools Superintendent Designate.
Alona Holmes on behalf of the NAACP, and I'm going to say Happy New Year until March.
Okay.
Gordon Weeks, on behalf of the Public Defender's Office. I was told that you cannot say Happy New Year, but I do not stand against anyone wishing anyone a Happy New Year. So Happy New Year to all.
You're going to have to reveal your sources on that one.
What's the statute number on that one?
Happy New Year's, everyone. I'm Colonel David Holmes, Broward County Sheriff's Office.
Good afternoon, everyone.
New Year's, the Guys Faith Community.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elder. I'm sorry. I think I interrupted you during your introduction. Forgive me.
Oh, no, I just said Elder Guys Faith Community.
Beautiful. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year, John James, Public Defender's Office.
Yolanda Brown, Court Administration.
Major Victor London, Fort Lauderdale Police Department.
Good afternoon. I'm Michael Walker, Director of School Climate and Discipline for Broward Schools.
Travis Lagon, DJJ CAP Coordinator.
Good afternoon, Cassandra Evans, Chief Probation Officer, Broward County. Happy 2022 to all, and pink and green all day long.
Good afternoon. Office of Prevention Services, DJJ.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year's. I'm gonna get it in now. You know, I say it usually until I stop running into people for the first time. Might run all the way into March. But David Watkins, Broward County Public Schools.
Okay. Is that everyone? All right. So let me remind us of our norms. If your cell phone's on silent or vibrate, raise your hands to be recognized if you wish to speak. Maximum of 3 minutes per person unless you're making a presentation. Be respectful of all viewpoints and opinions, and address other board members respectfully, please. And with that, we will begin. You all have seen the news as we have. We still, as not just Broward, but other counties as well, arrest in our schools, making headlines. So I wanted to, rather than the sensationalized version that we get from the news, we will ask any of our folk from the school board to talk about kind of what you've seen, what you are seeing, and where we are as far as school-based arrests. I don't know if that would be either Dr. Wanz or Mr. Watkins, if you could share the real story as opposed to the Channel 7 version. We would be grateful. Anything you could share with us.
So you talking about one today or just in
No,
general?
I'm just talking about, in general, what you're seeing.
Okay, so I will let obviously Mr. Walker or Mr. Watkins speak as well. I don't know if Dr. Osgood is going to join us or not because she may have other things going on, but if she does, I would certainly give way to her. Here's what I can say from a school let me close my door. What I will say from just observing overall in the schools. So there's a lot seems to be going on as far as the bullying aspect is concerned, right? There's a lot of physical violence occurring in the schools where major fights start in the school, spill over in the neighborhood, or start in the neighborhood and then spill over into the schools. So I just saw something come up, a student arrested at a high school for possession of cannabis by the SRO. So of course I'm gonna dig to see, what were the other options that could have been exercised. It is not BSO, Colonel Holmes, it is not BSO. And so it is one of our more popular northern cities. Cassandra, I already know what I'm talking about. Coconut Creek. So I'm gonna see what happened. But I think here's just from the educator perspective. So for 2 years, we had children who did not come to school. So I would have normally come to 6th grade. I would have been in the school a couple of years. I would have gotten, involved in the school culture, a part of how we do things, and I emerged into this 8th grader. Well, you have some kids who they didn't come to school for 6th grade, or they left at the halfway point of 6th grade, stayed home for 7th grade, and now they're here in 8th grade. They got to flex and show who they are and be this, and so it's working with all of that school dynamic and school culture piece, but a lot of it tends to be that they have pent up emotional issues that we have to address, that cannot be ignored and need to be attended to. But I will say a lot of it is physical violence. Like yesterday, I saw a video of a fight in one of the high schools in the bathroom where, some boys were they literally beat this boy. And no, it wasn't BSO, Colonel Holmes. It was down in the southwest part of the county, right? So it's all over. But what I can tell you is, we had the incidents with the arrest for the weapons is something that so obviously when they have the loaded firearms, the 3 that have happened on high school campuses, the kids will tell you it's not for in school. It's when I leave, I need protection when I leave. But unfortunately, they've got caught in school and we must respond. I'm sure, and this is BSO. Colonel Holmes is probably aware we had an incident yesterday at an elementary school where, unfortunately, 2nd grader makes it to school, backpack, family members stashed some stuff in backpack, forgot that they put the stuff in the backpack, and the baby's at school with the backpack, loaded weapon, drugs, you name it. So, it's just a myriad. We have, of issues that we are faced with and we are addressing. And I'll just pause for a second in case Mr. Watkins, who sees it more closely on the DJJ side, and Mr. Walker, who deals with it more on the expulsion side.
Before we do that, let me hear from
Dr. Osgood is
Dr.
here.
Osgood.
Okay.
And Dr. The question was, we wanted to get a real look at school-based arrests that are happening in our schools, not the sensationalized Channel 7 version of what we're seeing across the board since we've last met.
Good evening to everyone, and thank you, Marsha. I would say that this year has been a different school year. For me, I'm seeing things happening in schools that I have not seen before. I think the whole Trump era has ushered or reactivate this culture of violence. So when we look at the various incidences, we have to look at them in lieu of 7026, which was they call the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas bill, and other policies that are put in place that have really taken away and minimized the discretion of school-based staff in the district. So when we look at the social media threats, sometimes happening at 3 or 4 schools at one time, threatening to bomb schools, threatening to shoot teachers, all of those things require automatic arrest in those cases. We look at the one isolated incident where we had the 3 kids plot to murder a kid. So that one incident, accounts for 3 arrests. When we look at the different weapons, it kind of varies depending on what the outcome is. The state attorney has been involved a couple of times and chose not to arrest. I've been going back and forth dealing today with the situation at an elementary school where a daddy's friend who has been arrested several times in Miami for drugs and hideous crimes had some stuff in a child's book bag. The mother was in the house, and by court systems, she should not have been in the house. This child has been in protective services twice already. So he hides a loaded gun, needles and drugs in this kid's bag. And then the mom calls the school and said that they come in to pick up the bag. It's some personal items, don't look in it. And of course, the security person being trained well is going to look at it, and we find these things. So a lot of these incidents that happen with the kids, in my opinion, are twofold. Sometimes it's because they fight in the community and then they got to come to school, so they need protection. And then there's been a couple of times where the intent was to shoot or deuce cut a teacher or a staff person. So it's nothing that we're seeing that we can say that there's a correlation. Every incident is a unique incident. And personally, as a school board member like you all that love the community and kids and work every day to keep them out of jail, a lot of the behaviors now, it's taken away that discretion. And it's getting so bad to now, as a policymaker, I feel like we have to add some other level of protection to try to prevent something tragic from happening, as we've been discussing the whole thing with wanting. Before I was adamantly against it, but if I have somebody get stabbed or killed in a school and I didn't try to do random wanding or another level of protection, then I'm going to be negligent and would not have taken a measure of protection that I need. So what we see in the schools and being in the moment in the incident makes it very different. If I'm outside and I say, okay, this is a 13-year-old kid with a gun, it was just loaded, blah, blah. But if I'm in a school and I'm dealing with this kid and this kid is saying, I brought this gun because if the teacher say something I don't like, I'm a shooter, blankety blank. That's a different experience. So we're trying to monitor it. I think it's a bigger issue. I think that we're going to have to first look at sensible gun legislation that, to enforce legislation. If you have a gun, you have to lock it up. You can't hide it in the shoebox and do all those old techniques. And then we're going to have to start teaching our children about the totality of what shooting somebody means, because in video games, everybody died and then they're back in the next episode. So I would love to sit down and go through the data so we can look at the data. I think law enforcement would be very valuable in looking at that data, because even sometimes when they're interacting with kids, the kids won't cooperate, parents won't cooperate, and then the lack of cooperation forces you into another decision if you don't have the parent cooperating. But this is a community issue. I would say we can't solve it at the school district alone. It's going to take all of us working together and getting to some of the root causes of some of these things, and then be accountable as to help those kids get in environments that's going to help them move forward so that they can be successful. Yesterday, we voted to purchase an actual curriculum that go along with school climate change, because as we've been putting in all the support services, working with the parents, we have not really overly integrated it in the curriculum. There were some schools that were doing it, but trying to take it to another level. And it was really interesting for me to see the initial pushback from the board as they was concerned about the amount of money we were spending. It was just very interesting. And then we got another item that, you know, wasn't germane per se to the type of kid that we would probably use the first curriculum for. But this is something that we have to stay awoke. We have to look at the actual data and follow the data, see where, if there are things that correlate, and then try to come up with a strategy from there. It's not something we can just look on the outside and observe, because it's been my experience. I remember one morning, I think there was a bomb threat at Dillard, MLK, Piper, and one other school, all at the same time. And when we tried to find the kid, they had taken the Instagram page down. We got the feds involved. They're still trying to trace it now. So it's a serious thing. You don't know if something is actually going to actualize or not. So where we could give a lot of discretion before, because things are materializing so much now and the laws that have changed, we don't have that kind of discretion. But as a community, we're going to have to work together to solve this problem. And next time, Marcia, you might want to talk to the staff and invite our chief right now that's over safety and security, because he's the person that handles that, Dr. Neil Smith, and he can give a lot more insight. He's kind of been our person since Stoneman Douglas, working with the consulting firm, Safe Haven, and all of them that's helping us deal with the safety stuff. And as we think about addressing some of these safety concerns in school, it would be good to have that person at the table as a part of that group, because he's working directly with law enforcement, the different chiefs and those things, and he can tell you, you know, where he's getting pushback, where he's getting cooperation from.
Thank you. Mr. Watkins, can you add anything? I know these are, I call them your kids because I know you have a lot of programs that you help kids on. Are they still all over the board, or as far as high performing or anything, or any particular group?
Well, what I'm seeing is that it's all over, and kids who traditionally were able to avoid the contact with law enforcement aren't able to avoid the contact with law enforcement. Now, you've heard already brought up a few times around that loss of discretion. And so, you know, one of the unintended benefits that has come up recently is the committee that has come together around looking at social media threats. And that was initiated by law enforcement, because, you know, when it hits home, and now you can't get your kid, you know, your kid is facing a scenario where, you know, they've had something that in the past there would be some discretion on multiple levels, is no longer a discretion. Now we got, you know, we're finding ways to, you know, how do we come together and look at what is happening, and then how can we get in front of it? So, you know, I'm sure there are others on the call who can speak to, you know, some of the initiatives around these responses to these TikToks that have been happening, which just exacerbates what's already happening in schools. You know, we're doing this in the midst of a pandemic where we have, you know, 1,700 plus people out on a daily basis. I know Dr. Wanza can speak to that, with less than a half of the subs available. So we're really putting a lot of stress on our systems. Unfortunately, there's more idle time in some schools throughout the day, just because we're having to spend more time placing kids in, you know, media centers and cafeterias and auditoriums, even for temporary periods until we can get the coverages and all of that established. But that all feeds into, you know, behaviors that come with this type of stress. So, I've seen specifically a lot more reporting of arrests, but I've also seen, a lot more students that are participating in reporting of incidents that otherwise people may not know about. And I know I've shared that before, but we are seeing an uptick in the randomness of kids being arrested. We're seeing more active activity on social media that's, I believe, contributing to that. Things that kids were saying and doing from home, now it's coming home to roost. So now kids are now back in each other's face, sharing spaces they didn't have to share, and things are, coming. So, I know, and the last thing I'll share is I know the state attorney's office I've been more engaged with some of the arrests that have come to the state attorney, because I think, to be fair, they have kicked back some arrests that did not seem to be, appropriate, particularly with the levels, but still there are a lot more kids that are being entered through the system, and we have more entryways now since the passage of some more recent legislation. So these different entryways into the system have also, I think, contributed to, how we're looking at kids being arrested and what that means for our schools. And I know, Cassandra probably has better information than me, and Michael Walker might be able to speak specifically to data or incidents through the matrix.
Can I just elaborate on one part? Because you asked about, the levels of students, and
right.
Yes, it is at every level. To just elaborate on what Dr. Osgood said about the 3 students that plotted the murder, you got the drum major, 4.1 GPA. The other, all of them are at 4.0 or higher GPAs. So that's, so it stretches the whole gamut and does not leave any group untouched.
And not to belabor the young elementary. So when I talked about the state attorney kicking back, we're talking about 3rd graders, 4th graders, little ones being arrested.
And some of our special needs kids. So, we had the incident at Deerfield Beach High, where the student with autism, but has enough cognitive ability, is sitting at his home in Pompano, but says they're shooting right now in the gym at Deerfield Beach High. So obviously, that shuts down. You remember when y'all had to call the code red that day, Colonel? It was right after dismissal, by the pool, and we were all on lockdown for all that time. But then when they get to the child's home, this is a child with limited cognitive ability. So no, they did not arrest him, but it just reaches the entire gamut.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
Thank you. And I would pretty much repeat everything that was already said. I 100% agree that it's unpredictable where these incidents are going to come from. We have over 200,000 students, and you cannot say this school or this school is more of a concern. They're coming from all angles as far as in-school incidents, and we are seeing upticks in things like tasers and pepper spray and things like that. But I'm also seeing, and David can attest to this, off-campus arrests, things that are happening of a violent nature after school. But sometimes you can connect that to some of the things that happen and start at school. An example being teen dating violence, and we know the Miramar incident was connected to relationships that were going on amongst the 3 children. So it's a difficult struggle that we're facing this year. The overall number of incidents, when I'm looking at the Cessor data, the state reported data, the overall number isn't necessarily going up, but the items like threats and violence, there is an uptick in that particular area. So that's the disturbing part to me. And we've been working really hard to create some action steps, how we can address these behaviors. And one of the things that we're trying to do is approach it at the student level. because we think that that's a great way to have a big impact. So I think we mentioned last time, but we're moving out their Choose Peace, Stop Violence program. And we're trying to get it at all the secondary schools. And that's where the students take topics each month and try to spread social awareness. For example, this month is human trafficking awareness and no name calling. And then next month, the focus will be Teen Dating Violence Prevention Month. So just like when we do like Red Ribbon Week, when we're saying and say no to drugs, each month we want that movement to start with the kids. We need the kids to start getting involved. We need the communities to start getting involved. And the incident we're talking about with the elementary school starting out at home and them being at home, I do believe that families have purchased more weapons. There's more weapons available than in the past, in my opinion. And we're seeing more and more popping up. And I think it's a result of, like we saw yesterday, this kid's now going to potentially get a consequence for something that he knew nothing about. And it's because there's weapons, may or may not, I don't know all the details yet, but the fact of the matter is that there's weapons in the house and they're not locked up, and things like that are filtering into the school.
So I would hope that if what you are saying is true, and I guess Colonel Holmes would have more information. If I don't know how a kid could be consequenced when it was his mama's boyfriend or something along those lines. So I would hope that
he's not being consequenced by the school district. And
Right.
I don't want to speak for BSO, but I know they have more, but I could say definitely. And Dr. Osgood is shaking her head more vigorously than I
Marsha,
am.
I was dealing with that case today because it's a school in my district, and we will be prepared to march and protest again because that kid was totally innocent. But just like we get outraged with things, we should be outraged with these parents, because the guy that planted the stuff in the kid's bag is his dad's friend who has a rap sheet, you know, out of this world for egregious crimes and drugs. It was not just a gun, hear me. It was a gun, a needle, and drugs. I mean, what if the kid sticks himself with a needle with the drugs in it, an innocent little second grade baby? So for an adult to put something like that in his book bag to hide it, and it makes its way to school, is unacceptable. So we have to hold these parents accountable when egregious things like that happen too. And there was some talk at the school today. I was dealing with some of the school staff there about it, and I'm just waiting to hear back, because I will be the first one calling you to do a press conference, because it's clear that this kid is totally innocent. But the thing is, now with protective services, is we're hoping that a family member will step up and take him. He's been in protective services twice. So if he's been there twice, then another question becomes, how do we keep allowing him to go back? The mother has some kind of order where he's not even supposed to be around her, but she was back in the house as well. So that is a whole family situation that we're going to have to monitor and perhaps get involved. But I hope ain't nobody thinking about charging that little boy with nothing. He's already being traumatized and victimized enough.
So to clarify, if I phrased it in a way that it sounded like that, that's not my intent. I was saying when they put this kid in a scenario where he could potentially, not specifically this case, any case, where, you know, they're putting the children in scenarios where they have access to weapons or potentially, you know, putting them in a difficult situation. So I agree. And the intent is not for a consequence for this child. It's just overall, the point was that the families are also, like Dr. Osgood was saying, putting kids in these situations because of their access to these materials.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Walker. Since I've worked several years on the matrix and school of conduct, when the district says consequence, they're talking about, you know, consequences to the student. And I know that the district has been wrestling with different issues that have come up over the years. And so I just want to make sure of that. Well, let's go to Colonel Holmes, since this happened in BSO land. And it's all your fault, whatever happens on there, just so you know. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, I'm not at liberty to go into details about that particular case. However, I agree with Dr. Osgood. This child was a victim. This incident is being handled at different levels, and there's a huge investigation going on. But that child was a victim, and he was put in a situation that he should not have been placed in. And those that put him in that situation should be held accountable. And we're making sure that those people are being held accountable, and a thorough investigation is being done, and that this juvenile is going to be placed in a better situation where nothing like this happens again. And hopefully this doesn't happen to any kids, because it's important for these adults to understand that it's so unfair to the child that he had to deal with this, and in front of other kids. And then you know how word spreads around the schools, and kids can get labeled. That's totally wrong, and those that are responsible will be held accountable from a law enforcement perspective. I'm just briefly going to the previous discussion. I know Mr. Watkins talked about the increase of arrests in the schools, and I know Dr. Wanza touched on it also. From a law enforcement perspective, we've definitely noticed an increase. I think a lot of it has to do with what we've seen in the news across the country, with these threats and these mass shootings. And I can tell you this from a law enforcement perspective, a lot of law enforcement officers feel like they're put in a tough situation when they don't want to be held liable for any mass shootings that may occur, as have happened in the past. And I think a lot of law enforcement officers decide, especially with these threats, to err on the side of caution and to go ahead and make the arrest. And I know Dr. Wanza talked about, with kids being out of school for the past couple of years, it is so true. So many kids that we come across that have been home, and then they're thrust back into a school setting, and they're afraid. And a lot of them, see what's going on across the country, and even you actually have some copycats that feel as though they can hide behind a computer and TikTok and Snapchat and all those type of social media outlets, and make these threats. And it becomes dangerous. And from a law enforcement perspective, we can't decipher what is legit and what's not until we get there on the scene, and it causes chaos across the board. But in short, I hate to be long-winded about this, but it has an effect on law enforcement itself too. Our officers that have to respond to the schools and comfort sometimes, in a lot of cases, these young kids that are traumatized by all the activity that goes on with shutting down the schools and seeing officers with guns come on campus is very traumatizing. So we're hoping and praying that some of these threats are minimized, and that these parents are educating these kids and explaining to them that you can't do that. It's not a joke. This is real, and it affects all of us. Sorry for being so long-winded on that.
It's all right, Colonel. Dr. Wanza.
I just wanted to say two things, and then obviously not take up any more time. So one of the things that comes up, and I think Dr. Osgood mentioned it and someone else did, about the accessibility, right? So of weapons. So you take some of the tasers now that kids have in school. A couple of them, they look like iPhones, and they bought them on Amazon. So that in and of itself, becomes the whole accessibility piece to all kinds of weapons. That's one. But the second part that also is a contributing factor to the increase of arrests, and it doesn't make the initial action right, but it's what gets you to the arrest, right? So you take one of the last weapons possessions that happened, arrests that happened on the campus. The child was sent to the office because of a smell of marijuana on him. And then as his body language, this, that. So now they think okay, he may be in possession of marijuana. So they go to search for that. But that's when they find the weapons. So the initial information given to the administration had nothing to do with a weapon. It's the secondary nature that then may lead to, the child has committed an arrestable offense. So just.
Well, that would elicit a response from Gordon and Mr. Weeks and John James. I don't know about all of that, but that's why we got the lawyers.
That's right.
Madam President, we can't litigate it here, but my ears went up. But that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Hey, but we have a right to keep schools safe, right?
But Madam President, may I just interject at this point?
I'm just messing with you, Gordon.
I know. I'm hearing the great concern and the frustration that we all bear when it comes to what we're seeing happen in our community. But what we're seeing happen in our community, I don't think is isolated to our community. I think it's, prevalent across the nation and clearly across Florida. So one of the things that I'm hearing when I listen to all of you, because you're the educators that are on the ground in school, interacting with the children, much more intimately than myself, is that, I heard Colonel Holmes mention mass shooters and then threats to schools. And I do believe, I have my theory that there is a correlation between the threats in school and the prevalence of these mass shooter cases that we're seeing in the media all across the country. The question becomes, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the chicken, the mass shooting cases that are drawing the threats in school, or is it threats in schools that are drawing the mass shooter cases? But I think what I'm discerning is that it is I don't want to trivialize children, but there are children, it's a sea monkey thing. Monkey see, monkey do. And children, I always try to remember that children have a likelihood for impulsivity due to their inability to have their brain develop and think like ours. And when they see things that get a response, whether it's a good or bad response, the attention, the response, the adulation, the fame, the notoriety amongst their friends, it becomes something that they see and they then want to emulate, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It is the pure essence of why social media works. It's why TikTok works, because they become wanting to emulate the challenge. They want to emulate what they see. It becomes what they are obsessed with. So we have to ask ourselves as a community, what are we going to do to combat that messaging that is in our society about these threats to school? Because we know that we're getting them far too often, and they're happening with random children that ordinarily would not be getting themselves in trouble. So what is compelling them to make the threats? Is it bullying? Is it something going on at home? Or are they seeing the attention, the thriving for attention that's associated with it? Then it becomes the fights in school. We're seeing those at an unusual rate, and with schools that we ordinarily didn't see these types of incidents occurring in. What's causing that? What's driving that? I believe a lot of it's driven by the impulsivity of children, their inability to discern consequences and the ramifications of those consequences, and the fact that they're seeing their peers doing it. And when they see their peers doing it, they're going to emulate that behavior, whether it's positive or negative behavior. So I think we have to figure out a way to message to these children some other positive messages that will either counterbalance some of the negative messages they're getting. I know that Dr. Osgood is a master of social media, and I've seen some of the things that you've done to message in a form that children will be able to hear. We have to figure out a way to talk to them in their language. We have to also look at where we're at. We see that this is occurring now. We're coming out of a pandemic. We're coming out of a prevalence of mass shooters across the nation. and we're coming out of children not and being in isolation for almost a year and a half. What else are we expecting but a powder keg to occur? We knew that we were in a situation of protective environments with promise, taking every opportunity it could to see what was going on in children's lives and to support children and families. So now we got to ask ourselves, we know what works. We know that when we were in a position of supporting children and families and figuring out what was going on in their lives and protecting them and supporting them, that we didn't have this level of shooting and violence and threats in schools. But now that we went through COVID and all of those safeguards were removed, not intentionally, but because of COVID, we're not having this uptick. So we have to say, based on history, we have to learn from what we've observed, that we have to go back to that other environment, which is the supportive environment of promise, identifying the issues in the family, identifying the issue with the child, and putting the wraparound services so that over time we can combat all this negative information they're getting through social media and their friends. I think there is a silver lining to every cloud. And the silver lining to this cloud is the empirical and anecdotal data that we have that supports that promise environments worked, as opposed to not having that supportive environment. So that's my takeaway from this. We have to get back to where we were at before and move away from this reactionary standpoint of trying to be punitive when a child makes a mistake. We know kids are going to make mistakes, but what do we do with those mistakes? So that's my takeaway. I get frustrated too. My kids go to school. And I see what's going on in the news, but I am not going to give up my faith in what I know can help, and promise helped. We need to get back to that.
Okay, thank you. And a final comment goes to Dr. Osgood. And once you've made your comment, go into, if you will, what the wands or the metal detector, whatever you're going to have, will look like in our schools. Go right ahead, Doc.
Okay, just a couple of things. Gordon, the chicken came first. When you get 15 minutes, I can sit down with the Bible and show it to you. So when you're ready for that discussion, let me know. Wanted to know if we could get some kind of collaborative effort. The district has reached out to the federal government to try to get them to give us some type of assistance in pressuring TikTok to censor some of those types of violent things that we see. If they're able to take crazy Trump and his rhetoric off of Twitter and off of social media, then they should be able to help us with some of these types of things that we're seeing. And I am in agreement with Attorney Weeks, and it's why I was and still is a strong advocate and supporter of Robert Runcie, who was very diligent about embracing and allowing data to be released so that promise could come forward, and who had the foresight to add a school climate change department to Broward County Schools with the focus on having our whole school climate be like a promise school climate. And that's why we have that department. We have Mr. Walker, and we were aggressively moving in that direction. And we will make sure that the school district continues to move in that direction, because we need to create that environment across the district, not just, for the kids that get sentenced to promise, for lack of better words, but we need to create a culture in the district where we are supporting families and identifying behaviors, and we're training staff to do that as a preventive measure and trying to prevent some of these things from happening. But it's going to take all of us supporting and having conversations and working through these things, that we put those things in place and we continue to talk about promise and how it worked, that we're not bullied and back away and feed into the lies that's oftentimes told about that program in the media. When it comes to the wanding, it will be random. We will make sure, I was very clear to talk about the NAACP's position, and the NAACP thought about evaluating as a result of a conversation I had with the president of NAACP to make sure that it is done in a fair manner, that certain individuals or certain schools are not targeted. However, when we look at data and we see that we have more incidents, for example, at Miramar than we have at other places, then certainly we would probably do the wanding more frequently at a school like that, because data says that we need to. And as you guys can recall, I was adamantly opposed of any kind of metal detectors and any kind of wanding after MSD. But with this year's data and the incidences that we've seen in schools, we have to put another level of safety. I can tell you the 9 years I've been on the school board, I've always been very concerned about the number of knives that we see in school that we had discretion to kind of just deal with, but children bring knives and it's really scary sometimes. I'm also sensitive to the kids that have to go to the bus stop at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes a girl feels that she needs a taser or something in case, the wrong person approaches her at the bus stop, that she can protect herself. And then that weapon ends up, with her in school. So I think that we are going to have to seek legislation. Mr. Weeks gave a great idea, and maybe we can get some organizations together. Maybe we can get the Urban League to help. Maybe we can ask some of our newly elected officials to help find some monies that we can get to the NAACP to fund some type of education campaign, just like we've been doing about getting out the information about COVID and why you need to be vaccinated. We have to do multiple layers of education to our community. We have to be honest and transparent about what we're seeing with the guns and knives so that everybody is aware. It's amazing that even recently running an election as close as yesterday, and people still not knowing that Congressman Al C. Hastings is dead. So a lot of times we think people that are in tune and they know what's going on, and they're really not, because most of the time they're stuck to their phones or their little environment. So I think as we're talking, we need to make an action plan. And I don't know which committee that falls under, but this is something that we need to have some urgency to. And we need to start somewhere and then build our coalitions of groups and have this thing become a pandemic itself across the county, with getting everybody engaged on multiple levels, talking the same language about the violence that we're seeing across the district. And I think that we'll get bipartisan support. I think we'll get all ethnic groups involved, because it's not just a particular neighborhood, it is across the district. And the school staff is working diligently, but all of us wants to be safe. I would just tell you that there was a fight at one of my schools recently, and I saw it on social media. And I went to the school because I couldn't believe the principal and vice principal standing there, and the girl just punched the girl. She didn't care. And when we started having the conversation, she didn't even want to talk. She started saying, she ain't got time for this, very rude in front of her mom. So I said, well, let's just call the cops and lock up. She want to fight, they can take her downtown. I know some people down there that'll get down with her. So she started just going off and kind of, threatening me, saying, well, you don't know me. And, I'm just honest. If a kid ever slapped me, I'm going to drag them. I'm just telling y'all straight up, it's going to be on. If they slap me, I'm going to treat them like they grown. I'm going to drag them. And I said that to her, and it really got her attention, because she was used to saying what she want to say to people and backing them down. As adults, we have to be adults. We have to make adult decisions, and we have to demand respect from these kids so that they can be in line and know that certain behaviors are just inappropriate. So I think, Mr. Weeks, we can start with trying to find some type of funding somewhere that we can begin some type of campaign across social media and to talk about this. We have Mentoring Tomorrow's Leaders, 5,000 Role Models. Those are two great groups, diverse group of children that we could get us to help us communicate. Maybe we can get the colonel. I know the sheriff like to dance. Maybe we can get them to do a dance, hip hop, rap video, from BSO to help get the word out. And I know Fort Lauderdale ain't gonna let BSO outdo them. So we can get law enforcement in a competition and get that going. But I do think that we have to put some action steps on paper, Marsha, and make, from this committee and take the lead in addressing this. The school district, we can't do it by ourselves. we really need to help. A lot of our people are scared, we're understaffed, and they have a right to want to go home to their families as well and not have to be in school now wondering, even me, and you know, I'm from the 33311, a proud product of it. But now when I'm in schools, I'm looking, you know, I'm trying to make sure I'm paying attention because I don't want to get shot or stabbed or have to drag somebody on a school campus either. And then finally, our behavior. When we want to slap somebody, we can't just go post up on Facebook and do a live or Instagram video. I want to slap Miss So-and-so today, because as Gordon said, the children do what they see us do. So it starts with us. And then I think that we do have somewhere that we can start and try to help our children, because it's just a difficult time right now. And as we move forward, we have to not stop there. We have to seek legislation that's going to help us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe that there is such a thing as law enforcement trust funds. So maybe London Homes might be some project we can work on. Y'all look up in there. I know what y'all having up in there, so don't tell me y'all put that down. Colonel, I see you writing. Major, I don't see you writing nothing. Write that down. Okay. So we can work up over those. Really? Okay. All right. I'll text Larry and see what we can do around here, because we got to do something. So you've been getting, you know, they kept saying not BSO. They never said not Fort Lauderdale. They just kept saying not BSO. So you've been getting, y'all, Fort Lauderdale been sliding around here. Go ahead, Major.
I'll just say that I'm very impressed with the suggestions that have been made. They're spot on. I was making notes on points that I was going to bring up, and to everybody's credit, they hit them perfectly. And whatever we can do, we're in support of it.
Okay. Thank you. This is being recorded, just so you know that. Okay.
You say that every meeting you say that.
Just so you know. Just so you know. Speaking of Colonel Holmes, so where you at? Is your staff and your cross-trained staff in place at the Jack?
Saturday. They start this Saturday.
Okay.
They had their shift bids done, and all the changes will take place this Saturday. So I will have that extra level there, just in case something slips through the cracks.
Okay, and Chief Evans, where you at on the Jack and for his kids if a child does come there who is eligible from BSO? How do you keep them from entering the building and automatically being arrested? A civil citation eligible child.
At that juncture, with the cross-trained deputy being on site, then they would step out and begin to, I don't say undo the arrest, but handle that more from the Sallyport area. It wouldn't be inside of the facility. It's how I foresee that happening.
So who will tell BSO that's what they're going to be doing when that
I'm not sure at this juncture, because I'm not sure. I can't speak to specifically what is said when they come through the announcement at the Jack. So because the deputies are sitting right there, but we will. I know Colonel Holmes went over to the Jack. I just wanted, all he needs to do is tell me what he feels is the best way. If he wants our master control to ask the officer, a BSO officer, something specific, and then we can make that connection, or whatever he feels is most prudent in that process, and we will implement it. I anticipate it to be very few kids, but we will certainly get something up and rolling when the deputies get on site.
Okay. Attorney Weeks.
Madam Chair, I'd like to acknowledge your leadership on this issue. We oftentimes don't recognize some of the accomplishments that this group does, but when you were looking at that issue, I have to also acknowledge BSO and Colonel Holmes, because he made a commitment, I think it was a year ago, to do this, and it actually fruition came to light. So I have to publicly thank both you and Colonel Holmes for following through with the commitment to have cross-trained deputies at the detention center. I think that will do great strides to decrease the number of missed opportunities. That is actually bringing good thought and practice to fruition. And it took a lot of stuff to get it done, but it did get done. So congratulations to you both. Great work.
Team effort, team effort.
Yeah, the colonel has, and I must admit, he never pushed back on anything. He just said, "Let me work that out and figure out a way to get it done." He thought it a good idea, and did not think of all the ways where it couldn't be done. And so we're very grateful for that, Colonel. We appreciate you. I don't see the state attorney's office on here. Has anybody checked on Mr. Weeks, the clerk of the courts procedure that's going on with civil citation over there?
Madam Chair, no, I have not. I try to stay in my lane. That's the state attorney's lane along with the clerk's lane. I can circle back to them, but I cannot report on their progress.
Okay, thank you. And I believe maybe, let's see, Tamika. She could probably share, Ms. Gaynor can share if they have had double back with the other law enforcement agencies, the ones that had internal policies that prevented issuance of civil citations that was not in the state attorney's plan, that being Coral Springs, Plantation, and Lighthouse Point. Ms. Gaynor, have you and the state attorney had a follow-up meeting with those agencies since they agreed to review their policy? Have they reviewed it and made any notices of change?
Okay, to answer your first question, no, we have not circled back. There are still some agencies that we have not met with. We did make an attempt to reschedule with Coral Springs. They have I think we talked about this previously, but they have reassigned someone else to civil citation. So we have to get on that person's schedule. And we have not met with the other two agencies. And the missed opportunity report kind of tells us that it's still going on. So.
Okay, well, since we're there, why don't we talk about the missed opportunities report?
So we ended the year of 2020 in December with 15 missed opportunity reports, and these are true missed opportunity reports. And I just want to mention that I haven't seen this many missed opportunities in a month in, I don't think, the years that I've been working in this program, but there were 15 true missed opportunities. They were not domestic violence related, and all of these youth were first-time offenders. So they had no priors.
Okay, run the list, ma'am.
Yes.
Please.
We had one from Miramar. It was a battery. We had one from Plantation, which was a resisting officer without violence. We had Coconut Creek with 6 missed opportunities, 5 for battery, 1 for petty theft. We had 3 from BSO, 2 for assault and battery, 1 for disorderly conduct. And we had 4 from Coral Springs, 2 for battery and 2 for loitering and prowling. And Coral Springs is the agency that, I believe that's the agency who has that internal limitation regarding loitering and prowling.
Do you know if any of these were school-based?
I wanna say yes, because I'm looking at this report. I would have to have clarification, but I do have some schools named in these. And the schools specifically are Silver Lakes, Coconut Creek, and Coconut Creek. I think it's one from Forest Glen as well.
Dr. Wanza?
So Silver Lakes is a middle school, right? So that's in North Lauderdale, because I'm sure it's not Silver Lakes Elementary. It's got to be Silver Lakes.
It's Silver Lakes Middle School. It is.
So that's in North Lauderdale. Forest Glen is in the city of Coral Springs. And what's the other school?
We have Coconut Creek High School. And it was 4 came from Coconut Creek High School.
Right, and that's where we had what I mentioned today. So it's something with, I don't want to speak for law enforcement because I'm not a law enforcement professional, so I don't want to misspeak in any way, but Those are the schools and the respective agencies.
Colonel Holmes, any thoughts?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can speak on two, I think they said the BSO had 3 missed opportunities. I can speak on 2 of the 3. The third one, I would have to get more information, reference the details on that. But the 2 that we had both involved street fights. Actually, I'm reading here. One of them was a previous school-based incident where a group of young juveniles jumped another juvenile. And when they were spoken to by the officers, one of the juveniles made further threats that they were going to go back and take care of that individual at a later date once they were finished with law enforcement. And due to that nature, a civil citation was not appropriate. However, I did have some concerns, and I followed up with the command, and it was an issue that we had to address with the command, because even though the level of violence was raised because of the threats that was made in previous incidents, they didn't make contact with the state's attorney's office as mandated. And then I later learned that this case took place prior to our policy, but they should have reached out to the state's attorney's office, no doubt about it. And in reference to that case right there, the command has made contact with the supervisor and the deputy, and that is being addressed, that particular case. The second case, it involved a juvenile that got into a fight as well. And they end up pepper spraying one of the adults that was trying to break up the fight. And this one too is saying here there was an ongoing threat of continued violence, and they had been at that location several times prior. So that level of violence was raised, and we reached out to the state's attorney's office, and the state's attorney's office agreed not to issue them a civil citation. So those were the 2 that I have in my presence and that I was briefed on. And the third, I'm going to have to get more information from Tamika and find out where we are on that. And I have a briefing for that, our next meeting, or else I can reach out to you prior to that, Madam Chair.
If you'll do both, that would be great.
Okay.
John James, what say you?
Yeah, I was just I was agreeing with Tamika. I think she hit this to the schools. I think the other school that was missing that she didn't reference was Taravella. There was a school fight there. So it was Coconut Creek High School, Taravella, and then also Silver Lakes Middle School. And I think that was the one that Major Holmes was just referring to. Colonel Holmes, I'm sorry. Forgive me, Colonel Holmes. Forgive me. I'm sorry. You earned that title. I should refer to you by that title. Yeah, I was used to it being in Leon County where it's majors, not colonels. Forgive me.
And Taravella is the city of Coral Springs.
Right. So with that, I was just referencing that. So the school-related incidents are the incidents I think that should have been captured. Definitely should have been civil citations. There's actually one that happened in Northeast with Plantation, and the officer, it was a resisting without violence case where the officer even wrote in the report that he just didn't want to give a civil citation. This is a Plantation Police Department case. He said that he looked and it was his decision and he just didn't care to do it. I think this is something that goes against the nature of why we're doing this. This is what the essence of this is for. And when you have this like this is, I think it's appalling. To me, it makes a mockery of this system. If we're going to put forth this system for us to issue these kids these civil citations to prevent for them being arrested, then I understand the officers do have the discretion, but to be able to use that discretion subjectively, simply because you disagree with it, I think that is the problem with the system that we need to make sure there's better checks and balances there.
The the check and balances should have happened at the state attorney's office. Their part of it was that to deal with these folk was to not go forward. So am I to assume that they went forward on all of these, even the one where he said he didn't do it because he didn't want to?
Well, so I'm still cross-referencing these in the system regarding whether or not they actually filed charges. We don't have that information just yet. A lot of time is because they'll give them the opportunity to do diversion. So I don't know if they proceeded that far yet.
Well, I'm not talking about diversion though, because diversion is post arrest. I'm talking about these are the cases we're talking about civil citation. So if you gave diversion, that means the kids were arrested anyway.
Right. We were putting together a work group to deal with this issue. I know Ms. Gaynor and I spoke about this. We had a small meeting set. We postponed that meeting. To be quite frank with you, Madam President, we don't have that workaround in place just yet. A lot of these kids still get arrested. They still process. They still go to they send them to diversion. It's not often are they given the opportunity to come back around and give them the civil citation. And I think Ms. Gaynor actually has an example of one kid where I think the kid was actually processed through the system, right, Ms. Gaynor? That's the one you called me about, where they were eligible for the civil citation process, fight it in court, and then not even given the opportunity for diversion with that one as well, and was represented by.
Yeah, so I think that as we look deeper and deeper into this, yes, there's a state attorney process with the clerk that should be in place, but we're also finding other loopholes. For example, when a youth is taken to the JAC, that youth is processed. Once they're entered into that system at the JAC, that initiates the clerk process. So we've had cases, or at least 2 cases, where a youth was referred to civil citation by law enforcement because they sent the referral to our office. And after they were enrolled, we got notified by parents that they had court dates. So we notified the parties who needed to be notified, and that process needs to be worked out because there are some serious limitations when it comes to that JAC. So I'm happy to hear that the deputy, that will be a deputy at the JAC Saturday, but that has been a limitation because once they're inside of the JAC and that number is entered, that process is started and we don't have a way to pull it back. I don't believe Ms. Evans has a way to pull it back. That piece is outside, but we know that that is an issue and that it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, the process is what they're working on, but they're starting with those from BSO land because there's not an agreement in place from other agencies. So they're starting with those kids that are brought there that are civil citation eligible from BSO land. So they're going to work on that process first. Hope to get that down, and then we'll look to possibly move to other agencies. But yeah, we are aware of that. But although I don't know who the gentleman was that when we did our tour that the colonel sent over from BSO, he assured me. Matter of fact, I think he owes me a soda because he said that wasn't going to happen. I think he owes the judge and I like the soda. But go ahead, Judge Holmes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There was a message in the chat that I don't know if you got to because you were listening intently, but Yolanda Brown has said that Ms. Marcella from the State Attorney's Office is not present because she didn't get the link to the meeting for today. So I guess we can check on that. But there is this lapse because the agreement was that even if law enforcement said they didn't want to, and even though they get processed, that the state attorney was going to be the stopgap in this to stop the process and to get the police officers to issue. And somebody needs to, from the state attorney's office, let the officers know this is not, I didn't want to, this is 985-12. It's a Florida statute, it's the law. So everybody's thinking discretionary. The last time I read it said they shall issue a civil citation. So this officer is in clear violation of the statute. However, there's no ramification because the legislature did not put any punishment for violation of the statute. So sometimes the judiciary can step in and just hold them in contempt and put them in jail with the kid that they arrested.
Yeah, we would hope that the state attorney's office would do what they agreed to do in these cases where you have officers, because Coconut Creek is going to be a problem always, because they and Cold Springs, they are notorious for doing this. And may I ask what the racial makeup of these missed opportunities is, Ms. Gaynor?
Yes. The majority of them are black male. I mean, it's black feet, mostly
Give
black
us a
male.
number, please.
Okay, yes.
Okay, and while she's doing that, we will certainly reach out. Gordon, I know you went to the little press conference and y'all talked about the signed agreement, but that's not helpful if there's no follow up. That defeats the waste of your time. You could have been somewhere drinking coffee and rather than doing that, if they're not going to do what they're are supposed to do, that's really not helpful to us at all. Just saying. I'm going to send out an article. There was an article and a weigh-in from the state attorney in Orange County regarding the juvenile direct files, the numbers going down. It made reference to a bill that was filed by Bracy that changed the age in which children could be direct file, and they're attributing that to part of the issue as well. But I'll send it out. It makes for an interesting read. Ms. Gaynor, are you ready?
Madam Chair, 14 black, 1 white. I'm trying to get the gender for you.
Okay. So now, if y'all think this is a coincidence, in particular in those police departments, then, I got a bridge I could sell you. It is not. This happens quite often within certain law enforcement agencies. Our children rarely get the benefit of the doubt when it comes to these cases. Just put your hand up when you're ready, Ms. Gaynor, and then we will stop. While we're chewing on that, let's go down to Juvenile Detention Center and any COVID numbers, population. What can you share, Chief Evans?
Good afternoon to all. Madam Chair, on the topic we were just speaking on for data, I just put a link in the chat for everyone. That's to our dashboard. Has been updated, and so you can see it. It's interactive. It's non-youth specific, but you can get down to an agency and it gives you demographic information. So that's just a quick reference as we continue to grapple with civil citation. As it relates to our numbers here, just for the month, I just give the overall numbers for the month of December. We processed 141 youth through the JAC. And as of today, we have a total of 23 youth in security detention. That was this morning, with 21 of them being male, 2 being female. And I'm confirmed with the assistant superintendent that the facility ended quarantine on yesterday.
So y'all been in quarantine again, you're saying?
The facility.
The facility.
That facility. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Colonel.
Yes, Madam Chair. As of yesterday, in our main jail, actually not main jail, of all our jails, we've had a total of 105 positive inmates, COVID-19 cases, which is scary. That's a large number. Fortunately, of juveniles, we have 0 positive cases. We currently have 10 juveniles, 8 males and 2 females. We have 9 of them are in the Paul Ryan facility and 1 is in the North Broward. Okay. All of them, all the juveniles have had access to mental health and behavioral services. And we are following proper protocols on preventing the spread of COVID-19 at this time.
Are you still offering vaccines to any of the kids or families?
Yes, we still have that available.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Ms. Gaynor?
Yes, the number is 10 Black male, 5 Black females, 1 white female.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
10 Black males, 5 Black females, and 1 white female.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. That's about what I expected. And in particular, so it's all the more reason why we need for the state attorney's office to do what he agreed to do when it comes to children that are who are missed opportunities for civil citation. I look forward to hearing his spiel on this whole thing. And with that, Attorney Weeks, let's go into some legislative updates. Talk to us about House Bill 802, Section 17.
Madam Chair, you must be reading my mind.
Right ahead.
I have it right up on my screen. There's some concern about this particular House bill. This is a House bill regarding a school safety awareness program where it is amending some language to add some oversight and particularly adding enforcement and compliance authority to the Commission of Education when it comes to school safety programs, i.e. promise, civil citation, and things of that sort that occur. The problem that I'm having with this legislation or this proposed language is the enforcement portion. Enforcement is usually not contemplated in statute. It's something that is usually handled through policy or through administrative rules, but it's very broad language, enforcement. How is it enforced? Could you enforce it by withholding funding, which has been attempted in Broward County based on the mass issues in schools? Could it be enforced by moving to remove individuals that fail to comply with the statute? Does it give authority to the executive branch through the Commission of Education to remove individuals that are involved in these programs? I do not know, but it is very scary language, and it seems to be directly designed to go along with the track that this administration has been going when it comes to getting more control over school-related issues, particularly school programming and safety issues. So it is something that we need to be aware of. We need to watch it. I think it is sponsored and supported by Senator Grunter, but I also think Senator Perry is also a co-sponsor. And my understanding is that he has significant influence in the legislature. So we got problems on the horizon. This is something that we need to be aware of, speak to our friends in the delegation, Broward delegation, the Miami delegation, and West Palm delegation to advise or to suggest that we do not support the language about enforcement. You know, there is a trend that's emerging in Florida where the executive branch is trying to usurp authority from every other branch of government and become the overseer of everything. And I'm not sure if they went to the same school that I went to, but I thought there were co-equal branches of government, 3 branches that had different responsibilities, and as a result, kept each other in check because they did not cross over in the areas of responsibility. But when the executive branch becomes the doer or say of everything, we got problems. We have also, local control. Our schools have often been controlled locally through our school boards, and policies are local because every city and every county is going to be different. What we doing here in South Florida and Broward County is not going to be the same thing that someone may want to do in Central Florida or North Florida. So local control of how we address these issues is important. But it seems that they are trying to grapple back control and have a top-down philosophy where the executive branch through the Commission of Education and Department of Education will then be dictating how, I guess, our local programming will operate with respect to school safety. And school safety is so broad that it encompasses diversionary pre-arrest and post-arrest diversionary programs, because they can argue that the Promise program, the civil citation program, or any other program that deals with the safety of children is under their purview. So it's concerning. I would encourage everybody, it is House Bill 802. And if you go to the House of Representatives website, you just put 802 and the most active bills will come up. It is presently pending, and I think it's going to probably sail right through. So we have to either get some language changes or be prepared for the repercussions of what this is going to have on Broward County when it comes to the way that we approach our diversionary programs and our promise programs. That I just got off my soapbox talking about we all know promise works in Broward, right? But what if they in Tallahassee don't believe promise works? But it works here for us, but they don't like that it works here for us. So enough of that. That's my position on that bill.
Okay. I want Mr. Watkins, I would ask that you make sure Dr. Wanza, and I'll reach out to Dr. Osgood regarding send this to your lobbyists. We will do the same on our side, and we'll also reach out to Senator Bobby Powell for discussion as well, because this would obviously affect the district, and they're just obsessed with promise. Getting the data is not enough for them. They are really got some stuff going on with promise still. They're not done yet. When you talk about enforcement, then you're in a whole different arena. And so they're looking to take away the arguments of the district and its school-based disciplinary programs. The writing is clear there. We do have folk who are on the ground now, and we can see where the bill is and if there's any, what changes we can have. Some folk there like Representative Tracy Davis and Senator Bobby Powell and some others who, and I know that Representative Patricia Williams is still there. And so we would probably need to do this sooner, and I will check with Pamela Birchford, Judge, if you will help us with that to make sure they get and dissect this and we need to get with the educators from our fault and get working on this if we could. Also, Judge, we've been talking about the Baker Act situation in Broward. Can you speak a little bit about where we are now as from Baker acting, and then where I know there's another bill have been filed or have been bills filed.
Yeah, there was some correspondence, Madam Chair, that was emailed to me, but I didn't get to dissect it prior to this meeting, and I don't want to give misinformation. But there is still the pending litigation in Palm Beach County. I know Mr. Weeks, every time I see your office and that bin with all those stacks of papers in the back of you, you said that that was information on Broward's Baker Act information, and I really would love to go through that with you and see where we are. There's still an inordinate amount of children being Baker Acted for minor things. Some of them leave the courtroom where their hearing was, and they don't go home. They go back to the facility. They go to a Baker Act facility. So many times the judges are not made aware, even though the judge is included in the statute that allows for Baker Act. It's the judge, a mental health professional, or a law enforcement officer. And so I don't know if Judge Rubolo has seen that occurring, and if there is, an uptick from the courtroom, but a lot of them are going from courtroom to facility. Some of them are going from schools, and not just some of them, but the majority of them go from the schoolhouse to the facility. And as we have discussed and found out from last year, that these facilities are privately owned, many of them, but they get state funding for receiving these children. So I don't know if the schools can speak to that. There was supposed to be some help with Senate Bill 590, which made it mandatory for the schools to reach out and contact the parent and document how many times they called, who they spoke to tell them where the child was, because prior to that, there was no notice requirement. People were reporting their children lost or kidnapped, and we're in the capital state rather, for human trafficking. So a lot of them thought that the children were being trafficked, only to find out that they were in these mental facilities, and nobody contacted the parents. So it is becoming an epidemic, but Gordon, I don't know, have you gone through that bin behind you? I know you mentioned it, I think in November. I missed the December meeting because I was on assignment from the chair for another matter.
Madam Chair, if I may, Judge
Yes.
Holmes, I have gone through it. I am updating because every day we get the new docket, so I want to update the data. I've also followed up with some of the folks that y'all direct me towards. I had some follow-up conversations with them. It's one of my projects that I'm going to work intimately on. I'm preparing some requests to look for some stuff, and then we'll pull it all together. I'm going to need some guidance as well, because there's some things I'm seeing, some anomalies I'm seeing. So I'm gonna need some guidance as well.
Well, I also sent Mr. James the actual complaint that was filed in Palm Beach County on behalf of the children who were being Baker Acted there. So Mr. James, I know you received it because you thanked me for it. So I stand ready to assist because that I've gotten the green light from the NAACP to work with you all on it. So, Madam Chair, I'll have a better number and everything. I want to take a detailed look at what Ms. Birchford has sent me by email also.
Okay. And she has said that we have identical bills filed this legislative session to address the mental health of minors and the Baker Act. Representative Fentress Driscoll and Senator Bobby Powell have filed House Bill 1459 and Senate Bill 1510. And so those we will certainly be advocating for support for. And we will, so make sure that we review. And if there's anyone else that has an issue or something that is included or is not included that we should change, please let me know. That's House Bill 1459 and Senate Bill 1510.
Yeah, I read those also. But those are treatment bills. Which are different from just grabbing a child and sticking them in a facility for treatment if they don't need it. So that's why I wanted to dissect and see how closely related, because children do need mental health. And I think I heard in the last meeting, I did watch the tape, that those services are being offered in the school, but they're not mandatory. And so you can't force a person to have treatment. But the Baker Act is kind of like a forced treatment if you will. They call it stabilization of the person. So I want to see how that works in conjunction. That's why I didn't want to. I haven't read the total language and made detailed observations about it, but treatment is needed. But I'm also concerned about just grabbing a kid and taking them to a facility just because the facility gets paid by the state.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Judge Rubello.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to respond to Judge Holmes. Judge, I haven't seen any issues with regards to more than usual Baker Acts or keeping someone Baker acted for longer than they're supposed to. And I always keep an eye out for that. I'll touch base with my 3 other juvenile delinquency judges and with the chairperson of delinquency, Judge Williams, and get back to you to see if they've seen that. And I'll give you whatever information they have. And I will also make sure that they are sensitive to that. And I'm sure they are. We always are.
Thank you. Ms. Gaynor, did you have something? I see your hand is still up. Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah, it would be remiss if I didn't mention that the state attorney did send over their first referral to civil citation in December. So we have received one from the state attorney office.
Okay, I wish you had 15 more to go with it from out of the other one. That would just be wonderful. You know, so it's kind of like when law enforcement agencies says, "Oh, absolutely, I fully support civil citation," except they had 20 children who qualified for civil citation. They gave one, and they'd say, "See, the report says there's one. I'm supporting it, but not really." So that's wonderful, but not really. You know. Wonderful for the one, not so much for the remainder. Chief Evans, you had your JAC advisory board meeting. So give us a quick synopsis of that, if you could.
Yes, Madam Chair. So we did meet on Tuesday, December the 14th. Review overall operations from the assessment piece as well as from safety and security through BSO, as well as for the department to ensure we were being as efficient as we possibly could operationally. And so again, the update, Colonel Holmes has already mentioned about the BSO deputy shift bids coming into effect. We also discussed the memorandum of understanding that needs to be implemented with the due date of the 14th from the required parties to sign. We also spoke about the uptick and again, our concern and what we're seeing there. I think to the point made by Dr. Osgood, the parents, the impediment placed before our young people because of the parents' unwillingness to consent for their child to either be referred and or participate in services is something that I think we shouldn't tread lightly on, because oftentimes our children's behaviors are indicative of their needs, and yet the parents are not allowed that to come to fruition. And so those are some of the discussion points that we had. I do appreciate all those who attended, of course, for Colonel Holmes stopping by the facility to get his view on how the facility operates. Overall, numbers were low in the respective area of diversion numbers and alternatives, just indicative of the overall population. But what we're seeing truly is a different client. Less numbers, more complex. And so again, to retired Judge Holmes' point about human trafficking, that has not gone away. Weapons, firearm charges are still very prevalent here in Broward County. So we looked at a lot of data. We looked at the data of the assessment team and the areas of behavioral health and the family's fatigue with using telehealth as a methodology for delivery of mental health services. So we covered the gamut of children-based needs during that meeting. I think I covered all. I know, Madam Chair, you were present. I think I covered all the hot topics.
Okay, and I think there was a mention of the number of NTAs where you were You thought that the number was a bit high and you're working on ways in which you can deal with that, if I'm not mistaken.
It wouldn't have been, NTAs come up, but I don't recall specifically that meeting, but so many meetings come across my mind. Because the NTAs are issued by the clerk. And so our numbers, I've been asked for that number before. We don't particularly track that because it's a clerk function. So I can't give you anything specific on that. That may have been in another venue where NTAs came up as a topic, but I didn't speak on that I can recall.
And I think there was a comment in the chat that said the clerk's office toured the Jack facility. Is that correct?
Correct. I believe that was the same day Colonel Holmes, when you were there, I think the clerk may have been present. And so Diane Diaz has come before from the clerk's office, as well as I think it may be the second representative. And so they were I don't want to say surprised, but I think it was eye-opening to them, the actual operations of the facility versus what they believe happened at the assessment center. So I can tell you, like in another jurisdiction, they have clerks on site. So the challenge that we have of a youth being put into a system and the process starting, because you have a clerk on site, you can control things differently when you have that. So not sure if that was the purpose of their visit, but that wasn't spoken to me directly.
They just requested a visit to your wonderful facility. Is that what happened?
I believe so. They saw our lovely pictures and they just could not come. And so we did not use the holding cells for our visitors who.
I was gonna ask, did you put her clerk's folk in like you did Judge Holmes?
No, and I still keep that picture near and dear to me. No, but and I think Gordon may have been in the cell as well, but no, we didn't have that. But I had a chance to be with Clerk Foreman and Ms. Diaz prior to the winter break, and there were no particular functional issues at the Jack raised. Speak to any reason that prompted them to come other than they missed the tours that we had set up a couple months ago.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anything for the good of the order? Anything anyone wants to share? Any announcements? All right. Hearing none. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a good one, everyone.
All right, be safe. Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye.